Welcome to the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Schuknecht, and today's guest is Corinne Auman. Did I say that right?
Almond.
Almond. Dang it. It's like almond, but without the D.
Hmm.
Well, without the L too, technically, but it sounds like it. Almond. Almond. Uh, Thank you for joining me, Corinne, even though I just pronounced your name wrong. I get it all the time. In my defense, I get it all the time because I
I
don't have
can
an
see
easy
that.
last name.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel you on that. Yep.
Well, so you are the author of Keenagers, and I didn't pronounce that wrong. It is
Mhm.
spelled differently than what you would think. So let's start with that. Tell me about your book, why you wrote it, and where that title came from.
Sure. So, Keenagers with a K is a word for our kind of healthy, active older adults. And actually, not even health doesn't even have that much to do with it. But this group of seniors that we have today that are getting to 65 and going, I got a lot I'd still like to do. And so they're still working, or they're caregiving, or they're volunteering, or they're starting a new business, but just they are keen to stay engaged with the world, to stay
Hmm.
active. Because keen, the definition of it is having a sharp interest in, that kind of thing. So that's where the word comes from. And it's not my word. The seniors themselves told me that that's one of the things they like to be called. And it's really hard to find positive language around older adulthood in general. If you look up, what we might call older people, it's a lot of negative words and then a few kind of neutral ones. And so I was really trying to find something so that I could talk about older adults without having to say older adults all the time. Like, let's call them teenagers. And so that's where the word comes from. The book itself, the subtitle for it is Telling a New Story About Aging. And the whole point of the book is that our stereotypes about older adulthood are wrong. They might have been correct for previous generations of older adults, but older adulthood has changed. When Social Security was first enacted in the 1930s, your average lifespan for an American adult was 67. Well, now we have a whole other decade beyond that to at least 76, 77, and a lot of people are living well into their 80s and 90s. So our concepts, our stereotypes about older adulthood, they just don't apply anymore to the 65, 70, 75-year-olds that we have today. And I have a background in gerontology. I've worked with older adults for over 20 years. And if my concepts about growing older and what older adulthood was like, if when I started my business, I realized my concepts were really wrong. And if mine were wrong, after all this experience working with older adults, then everybody else is too. And we really got to talk about it. So that's what the book's about.
Nice. So is the book intended for the person who is in that age group, or like to educate people about kind of older adults? Like who's the ideal reader for your book?
So it's some of both in the sense that if you talk to people who are well into older adulthood, right? Like if you talk to a 75, 85-year-old, most of them will tell you, "Oh yeah, it's way better than you think it's going to be. Older adults are happier than you expect them to be." Just all these positive things. Like they're good. It's those of us who are approaching older adulthood and going, oh, this aging thing is happening to me, heaven forbid. And the people who are in those transitional years where they've gotten to quote unquote retirement age, and our society is kind of giving them this message of, well, it's time for you to retire and go sit in your rocking chair.
Hmm.
We don't need you anymore. Those folks are really struggling because they know that they still have a lot to give and a lot they want to do, but the messaging from the world is, hey, aren't you done yet? Haven't you retired yet? When are you going to retire? That kind of stuff. And so it's also for them to kind of, again, give them a framework of how to think about themselves that isn't our stereotypical Well, you retire and you go travel and you play a lot of golf, but you don't do anything purposeful and, go ahead and get out of the way for everybody else, because people really struggle with that. When you get to retirement age, if you're not really ready, but everybody keeps asking you, and it feels like this pressure to be done, and they're not ready to be done. And actually it's bad for you, right? Like going and just sitting on your couch all day is one of the worst things you could do for your mental health, your physical health, for all these things.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things you said early on was you mentioned, 65-year-olds starting a business, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine. I'm like, yeah, I can't imagine starting a business at that age. Like I felt like I was almost, I didn't feel like I was too old at my age, but like I felt like I was getting to the point of like, how can you be starting a business this late in your life, But
But what
yeah,
does
I
that
can't
even
imagine.
mean late in your
Well,
life?
yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. So, the you mentioned starting your business. I'm curious, what is your business? What is it that you do?
So my day job is that I am a care manager. I run a care management agency. So we have a team of professionals who work with families to help them navigate caring for their aging loved ones. So that can be a spouse or a partner or a parent, anybody in your family who is aging, and you're trying to help them navigate the healthcare system, figure out what kind of care needs they have, all those sorts of things. And so that's my day job. And what happened when I first started the business, I thought I was going to be working with 40-year-olds who were caring for 70-year-old parents. And what I'm doing is actually working with 70-year-olds who are caring for 95-year-old
Oh
parents.
my gosh,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean it's amazing to me. I mean, most of our adult children that we work with are themselves well into the quote retirement years, and they're caring for their aging parents who are still here. And so that's my point exactly. Like what we think about as retirement age and older adulthood is really so different now. There's no, and if you think about, like, we call people older adults when they get to be 60 or 65. But we also call people older adults when they get to be when they're 95. And there is no other time period in life where we would take people who were 35 or 40 years apart in age and go, well, you guys are basically the same, right?
Right,
A
right.
65-year-old is the same as a 95-year-old.
Yeah.
Okay. That it makes no sense. And yet that is what we do, because our thinking and our terminology for older adulthood has not changed, but
hmm
older adulthood itself has really changed in the last
hmm
couple of decades.
So you mentioned the the challenges that the younger older adults have. Now I'm
Hard.
gonna be
See,
like
it's
really
so hard.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Older professionals, maybe I just say that, like people still in the workplace that they have with
Experienced
like
professionals.
thank you. Okay, experienced professional. Yeah, I need some language from you that I can use. But I picture like I totally understand that. Like in any of my work environments, like, the older you get, like it is kind of like, okay, when are you like retiring? When are you done? You think of that. But I also kind of wondered as you were talking about that, like, I don't know, is it harder, different these days? I hate the term these days, but like these days where, I feel like people my age are like resistant to technology and going like, I don't want to learn this new stuff, right? And the faster that stuff moves, the further behind. It's not about your age at all. I fully believe that because I am like the kind of person who adapts to like any new technology. Like I love it. And then I've actually employed people younger than me who are totally resistant and like totally want to be with their pen and paper. But I think generationally, like I think older generations tend to be less
You're you're
adaptable to those things.
you're buying into a stereotype. I mean,
Okay,
and
okay,
that's it,
okay.
because you just made the point. in the sense that there are people in every different generation. There are early adopters who want to know all the new things and who are into all the technology. And then there are people at all different ages who are like, yeah, no, I am so tired of learning new stuff. I don't want to do it. If you've met one 65-year-old, you've met one 65-year-old, and they are not representative of the entire age group. And
Yeah.
you may meet the 65-year-old who's like, absolutely not, I don't want to learn any of that. Or you might meet the 65-year-old who works at the local university near me, who's on her third career, and her third career is in computer science, and she runs all the tech at the university. So,
Yeah.
you know,
There's all, yep.
there's
Hmm.
all different kinds. I do think as people get into advanced older adulthood, so when we're talking about 80s and 90s, that may be a slightly different story, just because of, physical changes, health issues, things like that. But again, you're going to have people, even in those age groups, you're going to have some people who are like, yeah, I want to know what's happening. I want to be in on it. And then you're going to have other people who have absolutely no interest.
Right. Yeah. No, and I believe you. And maybe I need to like challenge myself when I have that thought. But my husband's grandma always amazes me. She's like 90-ish, and she's on Facebook, she's texting me like
So you're telling me this stereotype, and then you have this example right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Well,
But we think she's the exception, right? You think she's an outlier in some way, and she's really not.
yeah. Yeah. Well, my question though was around like, is it harder? Like, I don't know. I guess like, does that become more and more challenging for what do we call them? Experienced professionals as they like they're maybe in their late 60s, early 70s, but they're still working, and like I guess if you may, okay, so maybe I'm answering my own question. Maybe if you are that way where you're resistant to those things, it becomes more and more evident that like, or not evident, but like people around you are going like, when are you going to retire? But like if you're embracing it and kind of open, if you're a Keenager and you're keen on the
Hmm.
new technology and things, that maybe that isn't such a pressure. Like I don't know, maybe it still
Yeah,
is, but
it's, I mean, I think there is always, or at least until we combat ageism, I think there's always going to be this sort of societal pressure of people continuing to look at you as you get older, going, well, when are you going to retire? Or what? And they don't even necessarily mean anything by it. Like they
right,
may not be judging your skill set whatsoever. They're just thinking, hey, if it were
sure.
me, I'd be ready to retire. I'd be doing this 30 years. Let's get out of here. Um, but if you're doing something you really enjoy, then why stop doing it? It's that kind of thing. So, but the society starts sending you these messages. I have a friend who's 69, and he's continuing to work, and he has talked about that is the thing that people keep asking him all the time. They're like, well, he teaches, and they're like, are you coming back next year? Are you coming back? Are you haven't retired? When are you going to retire? How many more years are you going to work? And his point is, I really like what I do. I feel like I'm still pretty good at it. Why would I retire? What would I do with all that time if I retired that I can't do now because I get my summers off and I can travel and those sorts of things. And so, he just can't figure out why he would retire. And yet very clearly the culture, all the people around him are sending him this message of, why haven't you retired?
Time.
Right. And so, and that's my point about people struggling with it, because even
Hmm.
though he's perfectly content, the world is sending him this message. And in fact, he said to me, he's like, have I gotten bad at this? Right? Like, would you tell me if I've gotten bad at this so that I
Right.
would know it was time to retire? Because people have said it so much that he's starting to think that there's something about him that he doesn't see, right? That he's not good at his job anymore, and nobody's really willing to tell him that kind of thing. And that's not true. It's just the culture believes this, and so they're like, well, why aren't you doing this thing that we all expect you to do?
Hmm. It reminds me of I mean, it's a totally different thing, but it reminds me of the pressure like that women have when they're having kids. And like there's this pressure of like you shouldn't be working, right? Like, um, and I whenever like it comes to those conversations about old age and retirement, the messages you start hearing are like, you don't want to wait until like you're old and retire and then like there's you just basically you retire and you die, like you want to like enjoy your retirement, whatever, like those types of messages. Or like, nobody ever, what is that like that statement people like nobody ever got to their deathbed and said I wish I would have spent more time working.
Right.
And I can tell you I'm going to be one of those people. Like I'm just I just work. Like that's what I do. Like I worked when I had kids and I had a lot of pressure to not work and I still wanted to do that, right? And then
Right.
I feel like I'm going to be the person on my deathbed who's not going to look back and regret having worked. Like I'm just not going to. But the messages people want you to believe is that you're going to regret it. Um,
Yeah.
and I
And I
think
mean,
that's not everybody is that way.
again, it depends on if you enjoy what you're doing, right? If I've got a
Hmm.
job I absolutely hate,
Sure. Yeah.
yeah,
Get out of there
I
and
am counting the days until I can retire. But if I'm doing something that I'm enjoying, then why would I want to stop? And I'm like you, my husband is counting the days to retirement because, he's ready. And I'm kind of going, I don't think I'll ever retire because I
hmm
like what I do. And maybe that will change. I can't, anticipate the future fully, but I'm kind of in that, what would I do with all my time? I've got to find some kind of purpose to keep me going, to make me want to get out of bed every day. And if I like what I do, then why wouldn't I keep doing it? So yeah, I
Right.
understand what you're saying completely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you hated your job or your job wasn't meaningful to you, then yeah, you wouldn't keep doing it.
Yeah. So I know in some fields, like I came from accounting, I'm in marketing, but my last job was in accounting, in an accounting firm, and they have a rule that partners have to retire at 65 years old. And so for somebody like that who maybe still is very active, likes their job, doesn't necessarily want to leave, but they come to a point where they have to, right? Do
Sure.
you encourage them then at that point to um kind of like look for something else that replaces that, whether it be like just a fun job, I don't know, different kinds of activities, things like that?
any anything that's going to give your life purpose and meaning. And so that could be finding another job of some kind, doing consulting work, but it could be taking up that hobby that you've always wanted to do but you've never had time for, right? It could be caring for your grandchildren, caring for a loved one. It could be volunteering. It could be starting a nonprofit. It could be starting a business you've always dreamed of. I mean, it really can be anything you want it to be, as long as you find something that is making you want to get out of bed. There's
Yeah.
very good research out there now that shows that one of the people who retire and don't kind of figure out what the next thing is, they do just kind of start sitting on the couch, or only playing golf, they're only doing leisure activities. That is fun for 18 months to 2 years. There's kind of this honeymoon period after you retire where that kind of
That's
stuff is really,
freedom.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
It's this honeymoon and everything is great. And then after that time period, people kind of start to go, oh, wait, nobody needs me for anything anymore. What am I, and it's this, we all need to feel needed or feel
Yep.
like we have a purpose, feel like we're giving back to other people in some way. And that's what we have to figure out. I really have no stake in what people do, because sometimes people will say, well, you just want everybody to keep working until they're dead. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But I am saying that if you enjoy your work, keep working if you can, if there's not a mandatory retirement age. And if you do retire, figure out what the thing is that's going to give you some purpose and meaning in your day-to-day life. And that can be anything you want it to be.
Hmm.
Maybe you learn to play the guitar for the first time and you start a band. Great. Fantastic. It's really up to you. But don't buy into this idea that it's too late, right? That it's too late and my time has passed, because so I do these kinds of talks with different groups where we kind of do a little workshop on these sorts of things. And it's amazing to me how many 40-year-olds will say to me afterwards, I realized you're right. It's not too late for me to do whatever the thing is. And I'm like, you're 40. You have like 40 years ahead of you probably. But it's kind of what you said at the beginning. That's the way we think, right? It's too late, or it's almost too late. It's never too late. Try
Mhm.
anything you want to try. Do anything you want to do. It's never too late until it's over. That's the thing.
Yeah, I love it. I love that. Well, you and I chatted briefly before we started recording, and I had pulled up your book on Amazon and saw that you have an award for the book, Next Generation Indie Book Awards,
Hmm.
which is really cool. So you have won an award for your book.
Hmm.
One of the reasons for this podcast is to feature books that you know that are written by women, but also that have a special you had a special message to share. Like it wasn't you didn't write the book necessarily to become a bestseller or to sell a million copies, whatever. You had a message you wanted to share with the world. So I'm curious what prompted you to write the book in the first place? What was it that made you want to get that message out?
So first of all, if it could become a bestseller and I could sell a million copies, that would be okay too.
Yeah, yeah. You're not against that. Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
just put that out in the universe
Yep, yep,
that I
yeah,
would be
that's
cool
right.
with that. Um, but no, so this is one of those things, if you think about or if you believe in like people having like a calling or something that they're a task that they're supposed to do in the world. I had been struggling with this for about 5 years in the sense that I knew I wanted to write a book, but it was this sort of resistance to doing it. And I was like, well, maybe I'll blog. And so I started a blog for a little while, and
Hmm.
that wasn't quite right either. And I just kept going back and forth, and I kept talking about writing a book, but I wasn't actually writing the book. And so then finally, I did a writing program that was supposed to hold you accountable for producing and writing your book. And so
Oh,
it
nice.
basically they gave you like a developmental editor, and every week you met with this person and she looked at you and said, "What did you write this week?" And you had to send her your stuff like ahead of time. So, if you didn't send her anything, then it was going to be a really boring meeting because and you were paying for her time. I'd paid
Yeah, yeah.
for her time and energy, helping me write. And so that's what I had to have. I had to have the accountability of somebody sitting there going, "Yeah, what'd you do?" and I
Great.
I am someone that, I work to deadlines. And so if you give me that deadline and hold me accountable, then I will do the thing that I am supposed to do, but I cannot do it for myself no matter how hard I try. So I worked through that program, and that's how I got the book done. Because if I hadn't, there's just no way. And
Yeah, that's
I keep
great.
thinking I need to write a second one, and I'm going to have to get some more accountability in order to
Yeah,
make that happen. But
yeah.
so that's how I got it done. The interesting thing is I kept thinking I was going to write a book about care management and like planning for your older adulthood and things like that. And I did. That is in the book in
Mhm.
terms of things you should be doing and thinking about to prepare for a fantastic older adulthood. But in the process of writing it, I was interviewing people, and I realized that all these people that I was interviewing were themselves teenagers, as we got to that word, but these older adults who were not your stereotypical older adult doing amazing things, who were modeling for me and for everybody else how an older adulthood could really look and all the things you could be doing. And that became the interesting story, right? Like so I can tell you how to prepare, I can tell you all the documents and all the different things you need to do and be thinking about, but the models, the mentors, the people who are already doing it and doing it really well and who I look at and go, I want to be like that when I grow up. That became the heart of the story, and so that's how we got to Keenagers.
Love it. I love it. Well, I'd never heard of the program like you mentioned. So I have a author power circle for women who are writing a book,
Mhm.
and it's accountability in the sense of just like we're getting together and just talking about our book projects, you know. But I like the structure of what you talked about, where it was like you're paying for the time and you better show up with something to deliver.
Well,
Like,
and having that developmental editor there who could look at me and go, I'm pleased that you wrote something, but this sucks. Right? Or and actually the real thing that helped was they just kept telling me, this is your, pardon my language, but this is your shitty first draft, right? It Just get it out. Just get stuff on the page. We can edit whatever you write, but what we can't edit is a blank page. And that
mhm.
was so helpful to me because I am enough of a perfectionist that I would want to write a paragraph and then I would want to edit, and make it perfect. And that does not work, at least not for me. Maybe it works for somebody else, but having someone sit there and say, just get it out. We're going to get everything out, and then we're going to see how it all fits together and what the
Yeah.
packaging is going to look like. And I would have never been able to do that without an editor there to hold me to it.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I'm glad you found that. Well, I will link to your book in the show notes. How else can listeners find you online or learn more about what you're doing?
Sure. So I have my website, which is just my name, CorinneAuman.com. And there you can find a link to the book. You can find links to podcasts like this. And you can also have social media, other ways to contact me, things like that.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Corinne. Thanks for coming on and sharing your book. And I think hopefully I'm a little ways away from the exact target audience for that book, but I it sounds like a great resource for anyone in late stages of their career or anything. Just to go ahead.
If you're someone who ever finds themselves thinking, I'm too old for that,
Right.
or I shouldn't wear that based on my age, you should pick up the book.
Yeah. And I love that because that's how I live. I mean, just little side note, but like when I started doing some TikTok videos, everyone's like, why are you doing that? Like, you're too old for that, right? And I'm like, but I enjoy it, so I'm going to do it, right? And I just I'll always have the mindset of like, I'm going to put time and effort into the things I enjoy, even if people think it's weird for my age or for whatever. So yeah, I love the premise
Let
of
them think that. That's fine.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I love your book. And yeah, so thank you for sharing it and thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
For a community of women writers to support and inspire you on your journey? Join the Author Power Circle. Connect weekly with fellow authors, stay accountable, and move your book forward in an encouraging community. Learn more at kellyshuckneck.com.